Was this comes a bit of a shock?
No, I wouldn't say that, Rob. I think Tom's been incredibly honest with us over a period of time about how he's been feeling, both physically and mentally with the game. So some of that's been well documented. I think what has certainly been part of Tom's struggle this year is it's the physical nature of the game with the injury that he had. That's also weighed pretty heavily on him. And whilst he's actually been able to get that into a really good position, it's just the nature of having to get to the next level again to become an AFL player again. He's felt over the last week or two that's probably going to be pretty difficult for him, not in a physical sense, but just mentally being able to prepare for that. So the discussions that we've been having with him over the last week have been really open, and he's been really open with us and approached us around that. So we've obviously taken up a pretty strong, close discussion with his family and his management, and where that landed was that Tom had made the decision in the last 24 hours that he thought it was best to move on from being an AFL player and move on to the next stage of his life. I guess that nature of it came as a bit of a surprise to us, but when you actually look back on what he's actually been going through over a period of time, it's also not a surprise.
And he sacrificed, it's obviously been well documented, the size of his deal, and has he sacrificed money in the remaining 2 years with the contract that he's retired?
I think it's really telling that part of the discussion wasn't even entered into either from Tom or ourselves over this period of time. Naturally, when that decision's made, you then have to have a discussion about that. But I think what's really important to press is that Tom and the decision that Tom was making had no reference at all around his contract in a monetary sense. So it was only part of the discussion post that. So what we did was take up a conversation with Tom around his playing future, and then have a discussion with him about his contract term. So what's also really important to press, which is what we've tried to say in our release, is that the monetary part of it, Tom was incredibly open and very proactive in putting across to us that there was no expectations about continuing to pay him post the end of the 2019 season. So I think that's really important to stress that as well.
Without breaching commercial confidence, is it fair to say that even recently when he was playing the VFL, Tom was prepared to help the club manage some of those payments? Like, he's been quite selfless, I understand, in that respect. Is that true?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go that far, but I think one of the things that Tom has obviously been dealing with for a long period of time is that he wanted to be the best footballer he could be. We proactively provided a contract with him that we thought reflected that, and hopefully that we were going to see the best of Tom Boyd for 10 to 15 years. And that was reflected in how proactive we were in trying to get Tom at the end of 2014. What's been difficult for Tom is that his body for some of those or some of that period of time has been difficult, both physically and mentally. So from our perspective, I think it would be very, very obvious that some of that's weighed pretty heavily on Tom in the sense of he wanted to be the best he could be, and he had some struggles in getting there. In a lot of ways, though, I think what's incredibly telling is not only how he's taken up this conversation with us as a club, and how he and his management and family have dealt with the last 24 hours in a contract sense. The focus has been so much on he as a player and as a person. And I think what we've all come to the realisation of is, regardless of the size of a player's contract, regardless of how he's been able to deliver to that dollar figure or not, the reality is that what Tom has been able to deliver us over the last 4 years has been an incredibly important part of helping us win our premiership in 2016. So regardless of whether a player is a rookie or on the highest paid contract at a club, his influence in that final series was enormous. So in a lot of ways, he's paid for that pretty well.
I was going to ask you, I mean, it's always a bit of a debating point in footy, and obviously Tom's well-being's at the forefront of the club's mind, and obviously his management's mind, but is it fair to say that the deal's been an enormous success? I mean, he was absolutely pivotal until the most vital games, one in particular, in the club's history.
Yeah, I do. We're very, very comfortable with the level of contract we provided Tom, and the main reason around that was if you only cast your mind back only that 4 years ago, at the end of 2014, we're in a pretty difficult situation. But at the same time, we actually believed that our young list coming through had a fair bit in it, and we really needed some really talented, high-quality players to come in. When Ryan Griffin, our captain at the time, indicated that he wanted to move to GWS, there was an opportunity within that deal to really go after what we believe is the best young player in the competition at the time. So in a lot of ways, you're absolutely right, Tom. We think that the deal has paid off enormously, not just in being able to formulate a list capable of winning a premiership, but ultimately that decision assisted 21 other guys on that day producing a stellar performance that he was a really big part of.
Chris, if Tom lost his love for footy, was that too simple? Or
no, I think that's fair to say. I think that's the game at elite sporting level, whether it's AFL football or anything else. When you're playing at the elite level, there's a physical and mental requirement to perform at your best all the time. And there's no opportunity to hide from that. You're evaluated every time you step out on the field. And I think the combination of that has actually been really difficult for Tom over a period of time. So in a lot of ways, what we've seen over the last 24 hours, and particularly this morning with Tom, is a sense of relief. And I think that indicates that Tom's made the right decision around this. Because you don't get a chance of just floating through this game. If you're going to do it, you've got to do it to the absolute best of your ability, both on and off the field, mentally and physically. And Tom believes that he's not capable of doing that anymore. So he's been incredibly honest around it.
How is he? By this,
Oh, we are. Yeah, we are. Because Tom is a terrific person. I think the way that he's handled this situation is another example of the quality of the person. He comes from a fantastic family. Both Jeff and Anita have had a great involvement with our club over the last 4 years. So it's sad in a multifaceted way, Rob. I'd say it's sad because a player doesn't feel like he wants to continue to play at the elite level at only 23 years of age. Maybe there's something in that. But also, as a club, we've also had a couple of retirements in the last 12 months where players retired way before their time, whether because of Tom's reasons or Clay Smith's reasons or Jack Redpath's reasons. The game doesn't stop for anyone, and it tests you every single day you front up to perform. And that doesn't mean that it's a guarantee that you're going to have a 10-year career. And I think the last 12 months has really proven that.
Chris, I'll give you an indication about what he wants to do now. I mean, the Bulldogs is an incredible environment. You've got Bevo, you've got Eastonwood, like incredible characters. I sort of sense that in one hand, Tom would be getting a lot of care here. Like, what's he going to do next, and how will you guys ensure that he can function properly?
Well, there's a couple of things in that. Absolutely, the club will continue to support Tom and his family and his partner Anna through the next stage. I think what's really important though is I think Tom just needs an opportunity of taking a breath and understanding exactly what the next stage of his career looks like. I think at 23 years of age, unless you're absolutely aware that your career is coming to an end, and I don't think Tom would have thought that in the last 6 months. I think it's come fairly quickly for him. I think the reality is he hasn't probably had a lot of time to think about exactly what that next stage looks like. But I think stepping away from the game, stepping away from the schedule of Monday to Friday training will give him that opportunity. It's also, I think, really helpful for Tom, who's been pretty diligent with his ongoing studies during his period of time since he's been an AFL player. He's a really intelligent guy, he's articulate. Whatever Tom wants to do in the future, he'll be successful at that. But I guess over the period of time, we'll get an opportunity of assessing what that is.
Chris, mentally, is he in a better place than what he might have been 6-12 months ago? I mean, he obviously made his decision now a bit from what you've seen? Does he feel like he's in maybe a better place?
Yeah, I think what we've seen from Tom over a good 12 months or so, that he's in a terrific space. I think the clarity around how he's made this decision is another indication of how clear he's thinking. He's put a lot of thought into this. This isn't just a spare of the moment decision. He's been thinking about it for quite some time. I think the back injury and coming back from that and the realisation of how difficult that is at only 23 years of age, that's going to require ongoing management right throughout the rest of his career if he was to pursue the years ahead as an AFL player. I think all of that sort of mounting up together has just indicated to him, I just don't think I've got that mentally and physically in me to be able to do it. So I think the decision and how Tom's come to this decision is a clear indication of how well he feels.
Will Tom remain on the list over the next couple of years in a similar way to how Kurt Tippett has at Sydney and Langfield Hawthorn?
No. The way we see it unfolding at the moment is he'll have to remain a listed player for the remainder of 2019. There's an opportunity, obviously, with this decision being made, to consider what that means for the mid-year draft and whether we put him on a retirement sort of long-term injury list. But we really haven't had time to contemplate that either. We know that Liam Pickett gave us that opportunity, and we're preparing for potentially having a pick. Don't know whether this changes our mind around that or not yet. So what our plan would be, that Tom will technically have to remain on our list as a long-term injury or on our list for 2019, and then at the end of 2019 be removed from that.
Did you consider giving Tom another extended break away from the club, or did that seem to work last time, or that wasn't?
Yeah, not in depth this time. I think what Tom has been pretty open about is that he's in a place where he can actually make some pretty clear decisions and didn't need time to go away for any extended period of time to think about his future. So, that's certainly been provided to Tom previously, but at the same time, we really didn't discuss that this time with him. Our aim and hope, in a glass half full sense, was to try and get him back to play this year, but we totally understand and respect the decision that he's made.
Can I ask about the broader picture? You've touched on it just a little bit, about saying there's something in that with 23 years old, one of the best players in the game when you picked him up a couple of years ago, something you were excited about. What does it say that someone that age, in that position, can lose their love of the game?
Well, I think that it needs to be continued to be explored, I think. As I have said, the game tests the athlete in a multifaceted variety of ways. There's no doubt at all that the focus on individual athletes within the game now has never been greater. Some athletes cope with that well, but it's not for everyone. And I think it does say a lot about the pressures that individual players are under, even within a team context. So I think as an industry, there's an enormous amount of work being put into that, as a collective industry and 18 clubs involved in that. What that means because of this particular decision, I'm not sure, but I think it's pretty clear that the pressures that players are under has never been greater in an individual focus sense.
Have there been any previous points where Tom had been considering this decision? I mean, over a couple of years?
Hasn't indicated that, Daniel, to be honest. He hasn't indicated that at all, but maybe he was, but I guess it's only something he can answer. There's no doubt that since 2016, it's been a bit of a roller coaster for Tom, both on and off the field. So, whilst we've been able to provide enormous support for him, and he's very appreciative of it, it's hard to know without speaking to Tom directly about that whether this is something he's contemplated previously.